Oh, I'm so excited about tonight. I'm just so excited to share two amazing photographers, two friends, two people that continue to inspire me to elevate everything that they touch. I did a little poking around through our personal history, and we, I believe, met in 2011 at Filter Photo when Sarah Hadley was the executive director of Filter. And I met them for the first time and just was blown away by their work and have been friends with them ever since. I just looked, we've shared over 300 emails over the years. And I've seen them at various portfolio events. Lindsay gifted me with two amazing interns for Lens Scratch that were with me for almost 5 years. And really, it was just like the three of us for a long time. And they were just amazing partners in Lens Scratch, Grant Gill and Sarah Stanke. And I reached out to Barbara and Lindsay a couple of years ago and said, Barbara and Lindsay, I want you to listen to this, have a 43-year collaborative partnership in photography. They do not make their own work. It's always together with each other. And I thought they would be wonderful editors to find people who are also collaborators and do those features. Now they've broadened their scope, and I don't know, it was about a month or two ago, they did this incredible week on Lens Scratch, and I put all the links in the chat on the politics of the kitchen, because their current work is really centered around that idea. And then they juried a politics of kitchen exhibition for Lens Scratch. And the amazing thing is that a curator saw the work and is working with us on a traveling exhibition of politics of the kitchen. So that's really exciting. But they have been together longer than they have been with their husbands. I think Lindsay's been married 33 years, Barbara's been married 34 years, but they have been photographically married, as I said, for 43 years. So, so I'm going to read their bio to you. Barbara Ciurej and Lindsay Lochman work collaboratively to framed, overlooked narratives and posit, is that the right word? Posit? Posit, alternate histories through photography. Their 40-year collaboration chronicles their gendered experiences from adolescence to aging and expands into critiques of history, myth, and popular culture. They engage with the legacy and storytelling potential of the photographic medium, employing stage photography, studio constructions, documentary, alternative processes, and artist books, here's one right here, in their practice. Their artwork has been exhibited in the US and internationally and is in the collections of the Art Institute of Chicago, H2 Contemporary Museum, Germany, Milwaukee Art Museum, Museum of Contemporary Photography, Walker Art Center, Worcester Art Museum. Their artist books are in the Yale Center for British Art, the Museum of Art's Houston, the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, the Indie Photo Books Library, the Joan Flash Artist Book Collection, and the Bainbridge Island Museum, amongst others. Lindsay maintains her studio in Milwaukee, and Barbara divides her practice between Chicago and their Milwaukee studio. Welcome, Barbara and Lindsay.
Thank you. We're so excited and honored. And we wanted to thank you, Aline, for that glowing intro, and also thank the LACP, which is amazing. And thank you, Jason, and thank you, Janice, because for your facilitation will probably make this all work. So should we begin?
Yeah.
Okay, well, Barb and I want to acknowledge that we in Milwaukee live and work on traditional Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee homelands along the southwest shores of the Michigamme, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes, where the Milwaukee, the Menominee, the Kinnickinnick rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. So that's where we are. And I guess we can start the slides.
Mhm.
So this is Barb and I, and I'm on the left and Barb's on the right. So that works this way too. And so we're trying to be very conversational tonight because we realize that this is what we've been doing for the last 43 years, is just having a conversation and getting riled up and thinking we had to address those topics with photography and see if we can have a conversation with the viewer and along the way with history and myth and popular culture. And so this evening should be a mashup. Hope you can, tag along with us. We're trying to go to the next.
Okay, do the down button. There you go.
Did it. Okay. So as I said, but you're gonna say it.
This is also a tag team of who says what and when.
We won't come to blows, but who knows?
We have always considered our collaboration as a conversation, and one that's stretched over many years and weaves in and out of many topics and revisits topics throughout the years. We love this Rebecca Solnit quote about conversation is, among other things, a more democratic model, as well as one closer to the systemic interdependence in ecosystems than it is a monologue of mastery and masterpieces. It assumes that meaning is to be found rather than imposed. And indeed, we've been searching for those meanings. People often ask us and are really curious about how it is that we collaborate. And we've chosen some pictures here from the history of photography. This is a Cherry Keaton photograph where he collaborates with his brother, but photo has such a equipment heavy practice that we end up supporting each other as sort of informed studio assistants. So whoever has the idea and needs to execute it. We also have enjoyed the companionship of having a road trip companion who will go on these wild adventures. This is a photo by George Fisk. Wonderful photo. And this one by Pavel Banka seemed to sum up one of the aspects. Well, we live 90 miles apart, and so we tend to communicate through telepathically, through as well as
Text
through
and phone.
Yeah, and email.
But I think even in the practice itself, we do have some kind of mind melt. We can anticipate things, and we have to pitch the projects to each other so that one of us will have to really buy into it. So this is the melding we try and do to enrich the projects.
We've often thought about that we have also alternated as photographer and model throughout a lot of our practice. And but one of the amazing things that's happened is both of us make work separately, but we consider our main work the work that we do together. And it's interesting that it becomes this sort of third thing that neither one of us can do separately, but exists somewhere in this mind meld. And it makes it much easier to edit that way because it's not as though you're personally attached. We look at it with a certain distanced observation. And it allows us to explore a lot of different kinds of narrative techniques.
And we don't hurt each other's feelings.
Oh, yes, we do. We can.
This is where we met, at the Institute of Design in Chicago, and as students. And
well, it was the bastion. When we arrived there, it was a bastion of modernist photography. I mean, it had all this illustrious history of having, it was founded by Moholy-Nagy, and he came to Chicago. It was housed in Mies van der Rohe's crown jewel called Crown Hall. It had, it had gone through teachers like Harry Callahan, Aaron Siskin, Art Sinzabau, Nathan Lerner, Barbara Crane. However, when we arrived there, being lured by its wonderful past, it seemed to have been, that particular history gutted over. It had, and it was a new moment in time. And everyone there was sort of searching for what was it. It was a small community of like-minded students. And meanwhile, outside the walls of the Institute of Design, the second wave feminism was just in full flower. And, we were protesting for the ERA, which still hasn't passed, but many women artists were challenging the gender roles they had been assigned through the societal presence. You can go this way. So it's no question, it's no doubt that this was one of the first images that we made when we went on a road trip together.
Well, this was in response to our environment in the school and the degree of seriousness our work was taken with. And we just felt many of our peers, although they were taking pictures of naked women and their girlfriends, and this wasn't deemed to be quite serious enough. And
well, it was truly a collaboration.
And so when we felt that, we thought, well, if it's not worthy, we're going to keep going, because it is worthy. And we felt really compelled to move forward in this commentary on the restrictions we were placed in.
Well, at the time we were working in the communal darkroom with the other students and bringing these pictures out to our teachers, and mostly it was like, what are you doing? I mean, it was 1977, really. The idea of collaboration was not a common theme. And, the legacy of the Institute of Design had been so much about honing your individual vision. And so that we were working together to make these pictures that were really thumbing our nose at, or our tuft, or dropping our drawers, or whatever it was, people were saying, like, you can't like yourselves and take pictures like that. You can't do that. And we were like, oh, you think we can't? Then we're going to do it even more. Yeah.
We haven't gotten this advanced thing going. One of the things, one of the ideas that we came across, it still held true, the 19th century Victorian ideas about women and domesticity. And we were both living at home at the time too, so it really irritated us that these kind of ideas were still dominating. And this is a quote from John Ruskin, the art critic in the Victorian era. And it was just so over the top that we felt we had a right to make pictures over another kind of top. But cookery means the knowledge of Medea and of Circe and of Helen and of the Queen of Sheba. It means the knowledge of all herbs and fruits and balms and spices. And all this is healing and sweet in the fields and groves and savory in the meats. It means carefulness and inventiveness and willingness and readiness of appliances. It means the economy of your grandmothers and the science of the modern chemist. It means testing and no wasting. It means English thoroughness and French and Arabian hospitality. And in fine, it means that you are to be perfectly and always ladies, loaf givers. So that kind of aspiration we wanted to have a conversation about in our photos. And so we thought about how we were trained and that we were, we had to be decorated and we had to give our all.
This was my wonderful mother.
Yeah. Oh, we have to say that our parents were we were living at home with our parents for all those reasons, and they were both very supportive. My dad would make cocktails while we were shooting and these sets, and Barb's mother was a very good model, and this whole idea about giving your all as the hostess was what we started thinking about and constructing images about. Okay, so just to find one more proof of this situation.
This was the standard textbook that was used for any introductory to art history survey course by Jansen. And it wasn't until 1986 when they revised it was there even a mention of a female artist other than an anonymous Greek vase painter, which was just, again, like the time, just this cementing this idea that we needed to insert ourselves back into this history with some kind of insistence
and rewrite what was necessary. So we tackled art history.
This was a series we did in 1980 called Glory on a Budget. Anyway, this was a series called Glory on a Budget, a domestic mythology. And we were basing these on master paintings. These little insets in the far right corner, lower right corner, were the inspiration. So we were looking at art historical references and juxtaposing them with domestic scenes.
Rewriting our own version of this John Ruskin idea. You can see this is based on Degas paintings, and this isn't that different from the things many other women were doing at the time, reconfiguring history, recreating myths, and this is the classic Odalisque, and as you can see. The Guerrilla Girls, Cindy Sherman, it was all Mary Beth Edelson, just trying to evoke who we are in our own vocabulary and on our own terms.
And I think that the statistic here for the Guerrilla Girls probably isn't much better currently either.
I think they've had enough
on that. We then, one of the ways that we've often worked is this sort of interior imagery, and then we end up venturing out into the world. And we were looking, we began to look at the suburban landscape as another way that one is shaped and asked to conform. And we did an entire, a long series on, two series, right. About the suburbs, the outer rings of suburbs of Chicago, and these strange scenes, both mythic and imagined.
So once we were on the road, we decided to keep going out west because that's the land of the light and the land of photo history tradition of William Henry Jackson and Carlton Watkins and O'Sullivan, and we'd become familiar with them. And Ansel Adams was our teacher through his books, because we took up the 4x5 camera and we needed to know how to get better negatives. And so off we went, and we took these urban experiences and sort of created these metaphoric dramas, spilling our emotions onto the landscape and making them stage sets. They're kind of elegiac and they're performative, and it was part of that, finding your place in the world in a feminist context. So there was a dark side to growing up, as you can see, and it was also a confusing side and unfamiliar.
And we were also responding to the built landscape while we were out in the Southwest. And it, against the backdrop of the intense history of all the photographers who have visited the Southwest, and, from Edward West and Paul Strand, Ansel Adams, as Lindsay mentioned, finding how it is that you can have a response to those landscapes. We ended up focusing a lot on the strangeness of it all, and a kind of performative insistence on putting ourselves in relationship to those landscapes. And at the time there had been some things written inconclusively about how it was that women were photographing landscape versus men. And I don't really know.
Pissing on the landscape?
Well, that was one.
Like squatting and pissing.
Who said that?
I think it's Deborah Bright.
Deborah Bright, maybe, in an essay about claiming the landscape. Also, we have always, over the course of this long time photographing, there would be this looking outward, then looking back inward. And since we often used each other in the photographs, one of us being the photographer, the other the model, and alternating those roles, over the years, we began to notice that our bodies were changing. And really trying to reconcile what it was, how one can move gracefully and empoweringly into middle age when those images and references don't exist in popular culture. We ended up looking to Ovid and the Metamorphosis and his words, because he looked at
life as pliant wax, always changing and transforming, which is interesting because that resonates with the whole idea of photography, of the transformation. So
for all things flow, all things are born to change their shapes, and time itself is like a river flowing on an endless course.
So this idea of change occurs through art history, of course, in the visualization of the female form. So we thought we'd describe mythology, history in terms of Aphrodite and the classical Venus, and then pop culture, which is what we were living through, which is exemplified by a new Venus form of Twiggy. So the one on the left is Venus of Willendorf, and she really does evoke a whole other mythology than Twiggy, and a whole other set of predators. So this change was really interesting to us, and we thought we'd approach it on those levels.
And
looking at art history again.
Right, and those sort of history, myth, and popular culture is always something we reference when we're talking about what our work is about. So we embarked on this long exploration and series called All Things Are Always Changing, which was from Ovid. And we were using his words, but these are, kind of considering like the roll of the dice about what body type you end up with. we began to look at these points in art history where there were moments when there were great visual flowerings of expressions of idealization and divinity in the body. And we were imagining, what if these were the fragments that were found in the ruins of Greek temples instead of the classical male form? We looked to the Renaissance and we looked at Michelangelo's work where his Sibyls and Prophets were like
On the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel.
Seers and storytellers who were imbued with a certain authority. And we recreated these with models and friends, colleagues, mentors.
And people had no trouble we told them, you're the prophet of Jeremiah, and we told them the pose, and they had no problem falling into these positions because we knew that despite culture, there is an authority just that you're living through, and that you can always assume that that pose. Yeah, the Sistine Chapel was created as a sort of a authoritative bolstering of the Catholic Church at the time. So we thought, and Michelangelo is the ultimate authority on physiology, even though he used his artistic license. So we also found these images were interesting because his were so inflated and overblown, and we were working with real flesh and blood.
And we sort of love these analogous comparisons, like the white beard of wisdom becomes sort of this white breast of wisdom.
So we started thinking about, how they would skid together and mash up, which is actually more like life. That it's not one thing or another. And certainly now, sexuality and everything is, as Ovid said, transient and always changing.
And the idea that these hybrids could exist, and we were sort of really searching for what the form was, and like if there was some future where it wasn't male or female, and it was, one didn't take precedence over the other, and it was just
shared. Right.
And so we were really searching for those. So this was one of the iterations of this work, in a kind of mashup way. And ultimately we ended up producing an artist's book, a handmade artist's book, where we
called Pliant History, just so you know.
Where we printed the Michelangelo images on vellum, on translucent vellum, and they would overlay onto the images instead of being paired side by side. So what you've just seen is a sort of evolution of how we often revisit work and regenerate, generatively come back to it. And
well, each way you, as you build it, you learn more about the nature of the situation, or you add to the conversation. You see a different facet, and we're striving maybe for what says it all, or what can say whatever we want to emphasize at that time.
Well, and also, often you finish a body of work and you think you're finished, but since we've been doing this for so long, we keep like realizing, oh no, that wasn't finished, and going back and it doesn't invalidate the previous explorations, but it does kind of enrich the further ones.
Hopefully.
Right. So we used
process.
Ovid's text in this as well. So that's what's happening here in this image. This was a sort of photoshopped, looked like a marbleized end paper, but it was a sort of liquefied version of the Sistine Chapel ceiling. These were all overlays that, and then when you open the pages, the history kind of disappears, and then when it comes back on, you get these hybrids.
And sometimes they're in conversation, sometimes they're in apposition. So we feel like that was very satisfying to come up with something that touched on a lot of points that we were interested in. Oh, and then we noticed we were getting even older, I suppose you could say.
We
were
noticed.
thinking, gee, how can we grow into maturity, this maturity, gracefully rather than kind of clawing our way to figure things out? And what happens when your hair goes white? You sort of become invisible. So we wanted to make the age, wisdom, authority, the power that's invested in experience. We wanted to discuss that situation in life. So we asked our friends and mentors, and that's Barb's mother on the right, and we asked them to pose for us and again assume positions of authority, and we photographed them as Roman portrait busts, which are also not only were made to honor the ancestors, but also as a political statement about authority.
And just as an aside, this was like the first time I had used a digital printer to print black and white. And the image on the left was actually a portrait. I was hired by this person to take a portrait, and she is of her, and she is an amazing looking person. And I didn't know how to do the adjustments, and so I printed this thing out in the printer, and it came out all bleached like this, and it was like, oh, she's beautiful. She looks like this statue. So sometimes embracing your inexperience, your mistakes is a wonderful way to.
Many people did ask us when we exhibited this work, where did we find these statues? And we said, well, we found them around the neighborhood.
Right. It was just like not knowing how to do the adjustments and correctly to get black and white prints out of your printer.
But they're cold.
They were
authoritative, and maybe they lack the warmth of mature women too. So somehow we came upon this as another sort of chance encounter with cyanotype. So we are aware of Anna Atkins and her botanical prints. So we thought, well, let's see what happens if we put them in a context of nature and the garden and so it was a great couple of summers that we spent. We'd go out and the plants would speak to us, and we'd have a portrait. We'd say, what about this one? And it was also experientially, and the process was very, not deliberate, it was very organic. And so this work became natural history.
And we did, it turns out you can, these were printed on Epson matte paper, or used to be called Epson enhanced matte, and that you can actually cyanotype and wash that paper without erasing the underlying image, so that these were digital, I don't know why that happened. But
well,
anyway,
so then we kept going.
Digital prints with cyanotype painted right over them, and then plant material laid, the cyanotype solution and plant material laid directly onto the prints, and then we wash the prints. And
we also, because we work, because the whole process ended up being very intuitive for us, we also did enough research to find out about the bleaching. So some of them are bleached, and some of them are very dark, like you can see in the far column here. But I think that we felt that really did characterize how you go through these phases of darkness and light in your own life, and how you gain experience.
We also, realized that there was so much emphasis placed on the bud and the blossom, and that, the sort of seed and the flowering and the regenerative.
Death leads to regeneration.
Right. That the seeds are absolutely essential for the next generation. And that, for us is like a model for how to live into the organicness of aging, which our popular culture really just does not allow. It was really empowering to do this series. So ultimately, we collected 12 portraits, somewhat referencing the season, you know, the monthly, a season, a 12-month cycle. And this quote by Rainer Maria Rilke was something we really felt resonated with this work. They wish to flower, and flowering is being beautiful, but we wish to ripen, and that means being dark and taking pains. And finally, we collected these and had a box made and created what we were referring to as an herbarium, which really was a collection of, you know, an herbarium is usually a plant
collection.
Right.
A scientific archive. I'll just take
Go.
a scientific archive of plants, which describe them, which state when they were collected, when they, what the characteristics are, where they were collected. So it's the science of this process of the plant life and cycles of plant life, and the idea that there are these characteristics that can apply to both humans and plant species was all put together in this case, which was also good because being a cyanotype, they could fade, and so we had to package them in such a way that was a practical situation.
And you know, the idea that after making digital prints of these, to go back to a really basic photographic process where you're using the sun and you don't know what these images will look like. I mean, we made hundreds of them, and a lot of them didn't work, but was really an interesting way to get back in touch with the analog nature of photography after you've been engaged with making digital prints, and what it is, again, to work with light and the unpredictability of what the result will be.
And we came to the age, and then we also were dealing with new bodies. These are the ones we created at our as we became mothers. Anyway, we had kids.
These little alien beings.
Yeah. And they were.
There was one more who was in my belly at this point,
but so we realized that once that happened, that the landscape changed dramatically, as many of you may know from having kids, and everything became pink or bright, in my case, because I had two girls, bright. The landscape was transformed. Everything around was made out of plastic, and it was sticky, and the food was transformed, and it was everything was urgent, and the time changed, and it was much accelerating and then slowing down, and everything was relentless. So we wanted to capture that big sticky grandness in our work, and we sometimes our kids agreed with us and helped us. They weren't as good as our parents, but if we paid them enough, that sometimes worked too. So this is a world that we call playtime, and it also sort of tided us over when we had no time to think in a continued quality of, you know, there was always a distraction. So we had to work in a way in our collaboration and at this time I've moved to Milwaukee to bear my children. So we had to figure out a way to change our collaboration so we could still create work and yet have some kind of conversation that we could share and move forward with.
And at this point, we, you know, started shooting. I mean, before we were shooting with 4x5, which required time and presence. And
no
so
stickiness.
we started shooting with 35 millimeter and just having our cameras on our
One hip
kitchen
and a child on
counters,
the other.
kitchen counters. And, it was kind of liberating because sometimes you get caught up in the idea that you're not making serious work unless you're doing it with your big camera. And
We got over that.
we had to get over it. And also just the kind of pivoting and adaptability.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk, but you can say it. Well, we had to figure out what to do with them once they reach a certain age. So we thought about childcare and schools, and that became a real challenge for everyone, and it still is, which is gets us always riled up, and we keep revisiting this idea about childcare and developing different iterations about that problem in our society.
Lindsay's the studio that we share in Milwaukee is near well, anyway, lots of storefront daycare centers.
And the timing, governmental support was given for welfare to work. However, then what do you do with your kids if you're trying to go to school and also get a job and then kids? And so a lot of daycares opened up. There was a lot of funding and support for daycares of all kinds.
So we began to photograph these storefront locations and looking at, because we had children who were little and we were thinking, would I want to put my kid there? And it began to expose a lot of the, economic rifts of what it is and the conundrums of what you do. Oh my God. And, social policy. And opened up this whole thing, particularly, post-Reagan, when many social programs were cut, the idea that religious institutions would take up the work of caring for your children. And there were these converted bars in Milwaukee that they had very little light, no playgrounds, and imagining if those were the places which were the most convenient and had 24-hour care and first, second, and third shift. And
another iteration of this idea was just watching our children grow up and getting sucked into pop culture. And these are the icons of, Disney leading our little babies over the volcanoes where they could get sucked in and their whole brains burned up. So we did another iteration of this work that was sort of metaphorical disasters. And another problem in this realm was the real, still, it's the burden that still is there about a vast desert of no resources, and yet women bear much of the responsibility for childcare, and they're just wandering, trying to move forward on this road. And another project we took on was just using the names of the daycares, which are very aspirational, and quite a few religious, My Little Angels, and none of them quite sync up with what we're, with the reality. So we were spending a lot of time comparing the reality with these aspirational ideas, and you should describe this.
Well, these are screenshots of various, and we created an LED screen, one of those, the ones you see at convenience stores, and we took 99 names of daycare centers from the Milwaukee phone book, and they would scroll through. And so these are just a few of them: All Night Childcare, We People Dream World, Watch Me Grow, What About the Children, and then finally we, one more iteration. We weren't, I don't know, it's just a topic that we felt really passionate about, and have been trying to find these ways to address it. And so this was a board book that we made recently during COVID time.
So it's
but-
6x6.
Right, and they were the vernacular, they were the
Title.
photographs of, it's called Childcare, a Hapless Primer. And it goes through A for Angel, B for Baby Academy, C for Wraparound Childcare, D, and we goes through the alphabet. And that felt like an interesting resolution. It's something we've been playing with, is how you make artist books as a sort of culminating of many of these ideas.
Well,
It
it's
seems
different
like an
than. it's-
exhibition.
And it's haptic
Oh,
and
I
it's.
forgot to put on.
Oh, yeah, well, okay, so then, but ultimately they left. They left us and went off into the world for their own, to make their own mistakes. And after they left, we realized that how much time, countless hours in the kitchen and nurturing and feeding and giving our all back where we thought we were rebelling. And we bought into it though, for the children. It's an emotional roller coaster ride. So we felt after countless hours at the counter preparing the food, we began to investigate this delicate balance, the nature of nurturing and the give and take of the feast. And Pablo Neruda, it helped us with these captions, which are from his 100 love sonnets. And this describes the, well, should we read each one? Or can you guys read them? Little by little, you turned into fruit. So we are the serving platter. Hold on, technical. It doesn't matter. Does it matter? Okay. A replica of the multiplying universe. It is a mystery to raise your children. Your shadow has the fragrance of plums and the transmigration of dreams into salad were the captions we used. But that was a dream, and this is a nightmare, because when we finished this body of work, we realized that there was a whole area, uncharted territory that we hadn't dealt with, because it was kind of it never looked good in this context that we were using of our bodies. So this is the uncharted territory of junk food or industrial food,
Processed food.
Processed food, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, when we tried to make images of things like Cheetos on the body, sort of making this connection between how it was we were, connected to the food and to nurturing, and seeing the body as this sort of serving platter as well as offering and bounty. But anytime you put colored sprinkles on the body, it automatically looks like pornography. And so we ended up,
in a way it is.
So that led us to begin to think about this uncharted territory of this push into processed foods, like how much it dominates the food industry and our food, the food we take, and how it markets to children. And we were thinking about Manifest Destiny and the push in expansion into the West.
Well, 100 years before, that was the right and the positive part of technology, to just move in and exploit the land that was our destiny.
So, when
we had conversations about
right,
that.
we had many conversations, and we, generate lots of lists and do brainstorming. And we, the term food deserts came up, and then Lindsay said, "Oh, Timothy O'Sullivan, that little wagon in the desert." And then suddenly that led us into Carlton Watkins, who was a photographer who both took photographs, beautiful, gorgeous photographs of Yosemite Valley, as well as working for the mining, lumber, and railroads industries. And his photographs have this curious way of looking at industry as sort of in
Elegiac.
in complete harmony with the environment. And so we ended up recreating these Watkins scenes in processed foods.
So this one is called Fruit Loops Landscape after Merced. This is El Capitan, and it's based, it's based on, this is our blue dye #1 layer cake based on that.
With lime popsicles.
Agassiz Rock with Yosemite Falls in the background is rendered in snack food, Cheetos. It's called Flamin' Hot Cheetos, but there's also barbecue chips and Funyuns, and you're probably all familiar with
It looks like meat, but actually these are Flamin' Hot Cheetos. And that's
probably are
Yosemite
supposed to
Falls
look
in the
like that.
background.
The Sugarloaf's off the coast of California. And our rendition with cola and molasses and sugar and different kinds of sugar. And you can see in the foreground the teeth that are the residue.
I mean, we loved Watkins so much because, you know, he was able to create these things in this distant space. And since these were tabletop constructions, it was really amazing to work on.
This is French Fried Bluffs from Castle Rock and Cathedral Rock, which we rendered in Wonder Bread. Yosemite, this is Nevada Falls in Yosemite, and we made the Marshmallow Chasm. And just so you get the scale, because it looks vast, doesn't it? But this is our studio space, and this is how we worked. And we could reach down and be a goddess and create the world beneath our watchful eyes. And actually, just an anecdote. Sometimes we would work on these many days and put some on the floor, and my daughter's dog would not go near these things. So that says something about the whole condition we're in. So we were justified in knowing that. We made a book of postcards, and then this idea spawned additional ideas about, well, what if this was the geological formations under these places? So this is called sugar geologies, and represents
they're hypothetical specimens. Like we were imagining what would happen if you excavated some of those landscapes. So there's this like the igneous metamorphic. This is made of desiccated cotton candy. This of
the gum is sedimentary.
Fused hard candies.
And this represents igneous rock formation.
And they're, you know, beautiful and horrible at the same time,
and they've been changing over time, just like cyanotypes.
And, you know, we don't have anything against processed food, but the domination of the industry is
another idea about this. Another conversation was this gorgeous picture that we loved, and what can we do with this? We love this picture.
Another Carlton Watkins image of Lake George peaches, and we recreated that image in silver gelatin prints, and then we toned it in 20 different kinds of jello, which the silver gelatin prints take up the color of the jello, being gelatin.
At this time too, we came to do some additional research, taking a 2-day workshop course at the Flavors of North America Corporation. It's just down the road in near Chicago. And we wanted to find out, well, what is this that makes these addictive? And, you know, what's this new relationship we have with fruit and food and anything grown? It's gone to another level of sensory enhancement by corporations, and so food is more and more being filtered, and we're and they're appealing to all those sensory and memory triggers. So we learned a lot.
It was both illuminating and horrifying because the industry, once you once you process food to a point, then you have to put flavors back in, and who decides what those flavors are? And they would just say things like, well, if you're over 40, then maybe the smell of Toll House cookies reminds you of home. But if you're under 40, maybe it's Chips Ahoy. And, this sort of flavor. There's so much science and psychology and marketing that goes into this, and it was just a kind of illuminating and frightening thing that really radicalized me.
It did radicalize you, and it was a time to be radicalized because it was what would that be, the 2016 election? So what did you talk about?
Well, I think that after that series on the processed food actually had went viral and had an enormous audience, and proved that, and it kept getting picked up by various, it was featured on in many places, but it showed us that work can be both accessible and political at the same time.
Because everybody eats.
Everybody eats, and food is such a,
Trigger.
Well, an entry point that you can come to that work with various points of entry. And that was a really interesting concept about how work can be made and work. So when under the Trump administration, when the Environmental Protection Agency's website went down for 1.5 years, and when it was relaunched, all aspects, all mention of climate change, the category of climate change was gone. As well, and many of the solutions and statistics were deeply buried in the website. And at this point, we had inherited some recipe boxes, and we were thinking and talking a lot about how recipes are meant to be instructions for the future. And we thought, well, if this stuff is disappearing, we should make a cookbook of recipes for disaster.
Well, we also had some work in Colorado, and we thought, we could go to climb the mountains. And
I wanted to go to Estes, and Lindsay's like, no, let's go to the feedlots.
So that's the way we research. But it did evoke this phrase in our head called recipes for disaster, because you're standing in front of a feedlot, and it was a small one, but it's just the industry is not aware of the unintended consequences that are becoming manifest to us on the planet.
And also, we felt if this was disappearing from the public record, that maybe we should create this book that would record it. So this was our cookbook, our recipes for disaster book.
We're gonna read this dump cake because it's hard to read. Here's how to make this fossil-filled favorite. Layer 1 million tons of aluminum, add bones from 60 billion chickens, stir in 4 billion tons of concrete, combine with 4.8 million metric tons of plastic debris, and blend in 3,582,000 pounds of radioactive waste. And repeat annually, which is what we do. And it will keep fresh for about 80 million years. So that's why we got radicalized enough to make this. And this addresses the hurricane season.
Aftermath gingerbread about just crushing your house. Yes.
The rainforest flambe. We were trying to meet a deadline, but this had, some of these just had to be made, and some statistics. But we wanted to show you our California Krispies photograph, because maybe you can resonate with that.
Well, it was the recipe includes like Rice Krispie treats, but the horrible, these, and
Well,
our
building where
attempt,
you
I know
can.
these are just dark, and it was a horrible project to work on because a lot of the, the research is really depressing. However, these it's like such a meta concept, like you can't see carbon, you can't see it. So how could we break it down into these bite-sized pieces? And I don't know if we were successful, but it was something that I felt really compelled to do. And so there's Extinction Cookies. And ultimately it came together in an installation where you sit down on this earth pillow and page through the book. And these are, it's a series, paper plates printed with climate data from the 2019, taken from the NASA climate data site. And it was, we're so inundated with data that it doesn't register as, the consequences of it just don't register. So, posing them as these sort of throwaway collector plates, and putting it on the wall is an installation that we've been showing. Currently, the work is on the Fence, which is an outdoor exhibition that occurs in 11 different cities. I think it's in Boston right now. This is the installation that was in Brooklyn.
It's very gratifying to have the work be accessible and to be out there, and to have it big enough that people can stop and maybe be moved by some picture and some idea
and provoked,
provoked. So, yeah.
And
this is our final work, current work in progress that we'll talk about. And as we move into this maturity that we have, this grandmother status, I am a grandmother. We think of well, if that's good or bad, I don't know. We think of these boxes as kind of vernacular archives of a family, a portrait of a woman, matriarch, who is making this and collecting these treats for the family. They're conversations about food, and it's a feminist narrative, and it's they have, well, Barb likes to say that they're coded messages in many of these things that are commercial recipes that you would clip out and put in your box.
Well, I just, the amount of energy that goes into collecting and clipping these things, and they're so aspirational, and they felt like found poetry by pulling out these selective things, this never fail dumplings. In fact, this person was so frugal that she used this cellophane from the cigarette wrappers that she taped around
Frugal, yeah, tidy, tidy.
The 3x5 cards, and they felt like these little energetic boxes of
good metaphor for a woman.
Okay, we'll leave it there.
But Barb thought of them also as a coffin, in a sense of another time and
or Pandora's boxes.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good metaphors. So somehow we're gonna get this all together,
and I love, just the patina and the annotation of these things. And there are some things written about that, this being a particular kind of feminist literary style. Yeah. And reading these tags, just the recipe for hermits. And, in a classic way, this is our end slide. And I said to Lindsay, I think we should share the Pillsbury's best 1950s recipe, prize-winning recipe for cherry winks. Which, to me, a lot of those, the recipe cards always have this kind of, sexual innuendo in them. They're really funny. And Lindsay, of course.
Well, I was mortified because I thought we can't end with this bow to the patriarchy and those innuendos and nostalgia, and let's move forward. So I wanted to sort of present a more factual image as a finale where you suddenly the unintended consequences are beginning to be revealed in the middle of your coffee clutch. So
Then we had an argument about whether or not that was a coffee clutch or a buffet.
So we'll leave it to you to decide, and that's so that's our conversation starter for if you the gracious audience want to chime in.
So thank you for your attention as we freewheeled our way through many years of work, and we're happy to answer questions.
Okay, so stop sharing your screen. All right, there we go. So please put your questions in the chat. I'm going to start off with a few of mine. Of course, I'm total snoop, so I want to hear about your worst fight.
Oh, well, when I moved up here, that
Oh,
came right up.
That was bad.
I was, we'd been working 10 years, and then I'm a tad older than Barb, and I felt that I had met the man of Mr. Almost Right. And so we must, but he wanted to move beyond, he was from the rural area, he wanted to move away from the city. So I said, okay, how about Milwaukee? That's the best suburb. And that was as far as I let him go. And he was, we had to compromise. And so after that, really Barb was really mad.
Well, it was
because
terrible.
I ditched her. And it's like I didn't even know him that long. But, there were other, ideas involved in that.
We never, I mean, we just made each other cry for a whole year. And
no, you made me cry.
Oh, no, you made me cry.
Okay.
All right.
So that was our worst fight.
Yeah, but that fight really wasn't about the art.
No, but, well, yes, it was. I mean, it was about continuing.
It was
as
about
a collaborative.
Our level of engagement, and it did really, make that. So I out of desperation, I wrote a grant for the Milwaukee Arts Council, Wisconsin Arts Board, and that sort of to tempt Barb up to do a project that was vernacular architecture up here.
And we did, we managed to work through it. I
And
mean,
by
that
that
was
time-
really big, pivotal, like, yeah. But our why? Oh, we God, we fight all the time.
No, we don't.
We just argue.
We're
We just
working.
argue. Someone like one of us will say, I absolutely refuse that you cannot use that word in any artist statement we ever have.
And then Barb takes me seriously when it was actually, just me talking at that moment. So
yeah,
things like that.
I don't know. So besides that one, I mean, that one was really
Go
big.
on about that. Move on to the next one.
Okay. So how do you present your ideas to each other? I'm just so curious about this collaboration. Like, do you independently come up with a thought on something and then share it with each other and then banter back and forth about it and see how that evolves?
Yes, we do.
We're usually on the same page about some topic that we're pissed off about. It always starts with being irritated about something.
Seems. Yes, and then someone will share, we share things via text, via email, and both collect files, research files, as we're working through a project. And we try not to be too veto the other person's ideas too soon in the project, although we're pretty bad at that. Like, oh, that's a terrible idea. I hate that idea.
So how can we make it work?
But we wide ranging. We have so many files of various. So.
But it's all about life. What we're because we're the same age, we're going through life at the same rate, sort of. And I remember having to wait around for Barb to have a kid so she could see.
Oh yeah, I didn't get
really
that.
weird.
That was pretty bad too when Lindsay had a child.
Yeah. John asked, do you collaborate in order to throw away ideas?
Yeah, I mean, both of us have we
Well, the
share a
part-
similar aesthetic, but we approach things really differently. And so there is often a give and take. What ends up being combining gets riffed on somehow, and it's not yours anymore. So um,
And I also mentioned, I think earlier, that we have to really pitch something to convince the other person. So it's like a pre-edit. We have to pre-edit it so we can give it to the other person and they'll buy into it.
you know, and that requires a kind of articulation. When you're working on your own work, you don't actually have to find words around it usually.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
word.
yeah,
Or an explanation, or to be really substantiate the reasons why you're doing it. So it does help.
yeah. It makes you synthesize your ideas much earlier in the process, which so that you can pitch them to the other person. So that's
Yeah, and that is interesting, and to give it, and sometimes it'll be just like, you have to trust me. I don't know what this is. You just have to let me do it. And
Also, I think it's a similar function to because we met you at a photo critique environment. I remember the very first review we went to, and the very first reviewer, we showed those heads with the cyanotypes, and somebody said, "Oh, so what's with the blue?" And we thought, well, they're cyanotypes, but then that launched us on a really deep investigation of what the meaning of blue is that Barb told you last Monday. So yeah, you can see where,
yeah.
yeah, what is with the blue, and what is with Carlton Watkins. And so one of us will often just do the research about that topic just so we can, and then of course your artist statement is a little better from that too.
so yeah, I think there's,
I'm thinking, I was just going to say, I think having a collaborator gives you a buffer to failure in a sense. Like I'm thinking about when an artist goes to a portfolio review and the review does not go well. I can speak for myself, being at Photo Fest one year and literally going up to my hotel room and getting under the sheets and hiding and weeping. And then, years later, like, what was that all about? But having a partner in this, it allows you to like have this buffer so it's not all you personally, I would think. And then I would think that there's someone to really enjoy your successes with too. So,
Lindsay,
okay.
yeah, no, it all, whenever you're doing work, it's always like, even, every new project feels like a climbing a mountain again. It doesn't necessarily carry over that the next one will be success. I mean, it's wonderful to get recognition or validation for the work you do, but it also it's always a personal struggle to make it work, or a collective struggle or whatever, to do that, and to enjoy. I'm always admonishing Lindsay, like, because she's a hard driver. It's always like, okay, well, now we need to go do this, and I'm like, can we just take a moment?
Stop yourself.
Right, it was good that we did this. And, but
Okay, so I have a question from the fabulous Grace Weston. Has one series prompted or brought you to another, or have you experienced fallow periods?
Well, both.
yeah, I mean, like in the sequence that we did when we were doing the All Things Are Always Changing, that work was feeding, and we had the time and the space to do that. Certainly when we were making work about our children and our children were little, everything was much spottier and just
Oh, Barb, you were just saying, oh, we had years when we didn't do a damn
well,
thing.
it would be like a year would pass and it'd be like, oh no, wait, we haven't done anything, you know, and I mean, you were thinking about work and feeling guilty about not making work,
And feeling guilty you were a bad mom because you were thinking
I-
about work, and
you know,
that's
in
always a
hindsight, I
tough
wished
issue.
I would have not done that. So, you know, it was a conflict, you know, it's just living your life and trying to juggle all the things. But yeah, so there would be fallow periods, but it was, and better times when we certainly, one thing that we did when our children were little is we would manage to get 2-week residencies at an artist residency in Ragdale in Illinois, and which was traveling distance for both of us, although we would have this 2 concentrated weeks, and that those 2 weeks would carry us over for like 8 months of just,
Mhm.
so even if you could get that away for yourself, just some block of time where you're able to concentrate. Not usually I would spend the first 2 days crying because I would be like, oh, it took me so much to extricate from my life and I can't, you know, I couldn't, it was so exhausting. But making that time to concentrate is a juggling act, and
Yeah.
better times of it than others. And yeah.
So Sonia just asked, I'm so curious to hear more about your experience at the Institute of Design. Were there any particular professors, lectures that inspired you, or was it so misogynistic that the inspiration was a reaction to the curriculum and atmosphere?
It's another both.
Yeah, actually, I mean, we got a really solid background in how to make classical prints and how to see and how to, you know, frame an image, and technically beautiful, and
Modernist
and
sensibility.
rigorous. And then we had one of our teachers was so stymied by the work that we were doing. He brought it home to his wife.
We can say David Plowden was a great teacher there, and she said, yeah, they're onto something. So and
he didn't know what to make of the work, and but he had the good enough sense to bring it home to his wife, who said, just let him do it, you know, just like.
I think he came from a background as industrial historian, so his photographs and his books were about railroads and steel mills and the Rust Belt area of the Midwest. And his mantra was always like, go halfway for the viewer. So I think that added another layer of rigor, like, well, you know, because your audience is often yourself when you're young, and you know, your peers, and so I think that for a while we used it, and then we realized that, well, we can alter it to our own for our own use, and we also had some inspiring teachers like Ray, who was had originally gone to the Institute of Design when Maholi was there, and he was just a great person who would. And one of the few who would have students over to his house, and we'd all sit around and talk, and you could feel like a sense of community. And then Patty put it to
Right, there were no female photography teachers there at the time, and finally Patty Carroll, who was teaching. She wasn't our teacher, but at the end of when we were graduating, she said, you should go join a women's cooperative gallery. And in Chicago, there was a wonderful women's cooperative gallery, which we did join, which really was a wonderful, you know, community and atmosphere and education. And
it's like a graduate course,
right? And
be an artist.
So she had the presence of mind to say that to us, which was really, really wonderful advice. She also said, her parting words were, you know, if you ever have an exhibition, be sure you have a really good party after.
So we've lived by those words.
And that was, wonder, like to your point about celebrating, but I don't regret, yes, we were reacting so much to the fact that partly that the legacy of that place no longer was, it wasn't like it wasn't relevant. It was a backdrop against which you
Backwash.
were trying to, find your own path and thinking, well, all that's been done and where do you go?
Yeah.
So in a negative way, it was a positive thing. And a lot of, and it really solidified our collaboration because in so many ways we were like co-conspirators.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I'm
It,
grateful.
it, it brought to mind that my very first photography class, my teacher said, I showed your work to my wife and she thinks it's good. So
Goodness for those wives.
I'm going to I have two final questions. Sally Ann Field asked, did you ever pitch an idea that your collaborator rejected initially, but then was later realized?
Oh yeah.
I'm going to hear you say both.
Well, Lindsay was the one who started constructing the junk food landscapes. You started doing that, and I was like, "What is she doing?" And this is going to be really good. And it was getting built over the course of a month, and I wasn't seeing where that was going, and a lot of times one of us will.
I think I sent you like I would sort of build it and then sort of make a test print and email it to her, and she started coming around, and but it was funny because you bring that up because my husband told her that I was never so happy in our marriage when I was making that junk food stuff. So. Well, whatever that means. Maybe I was God, and I felt like God is making the earth.
He's constantly leaving you bags of flaming hot Cheetos.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the final question. What qualities do each of you bring to the relationship that the other one doesn't have?
Barb says I taught her how to argue. Because she's
I don't like to argue at high volume, but Lindsay does.
I don't like to.
As sports.
Well, that's how I was raised.
Well, okay, get over it.
Not now.
And I can't, anyway, so that I still get like too caught up in the arguing part of it when it should, but that's been part of it for a long time. So yes, you have taught me how to argue.
Okay, Lindsay, what has Barbara taught you?
She's taught me she's the most compassionate person I know. And she's also relentless. Can't we just call some tech guy? There's always I feel like there's a workaround, but Barb just powers through stuff. And her relentlessness is really impressive and inspiring because any problem can be solved if I give it to Barb.
Well, I hope the audience takes a look at those links, and especially the Politics of the Kitchen Week on Linscratch. There's just some amazing projects they've unearthed. And I just want to say a personal thank you to the two of you who are really a voice for so many women, so many things that we need to be thinking about in our lives, and showing us things in a way that is humorous and approachable and beautiful and weird. And you just truly are an inspiration. And I just feel like everything you do is a home run. And so bravo to the two of you. I hope you will have a glass of wine or a second cocktail tonight and celebrate just the incredible achievements you've made over these past 43 years. So thank you.
Back at you, Ellie. And thank you for having us.
Thank you. I hope that was, we were struggling with how you, go through a course of all these projects because they flip a lot.
And thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah,